The morning Naomi called me into her office, I had already packed Oliver's lunch with the wrong granola bar, argued with our building's parking gate for 11 minutes, and answered 2 Slack messages while still technically asleep. That was 32 for you. Not dramatic, not particularly interesting, not the kind of life that prepared you for anything you hadn't planned. Oliver was 12, sharp in a way that embarrassed me at parent-teacher nights, and he had recently developed the habit of critiquing my cooking with the authority of someone who had never once operated a stove. "That's not how you scramble eggs," he said one Tuesday morning, standing at the counter in hockey socks and last year's jersey, watching me push eggs around a pan like I was herding small, reluctant animals. "I've been scrambling eggs for 20 years. "Yeah, and they're still rubbery." "File a complaint with the chef." "You are the chef." "I'm the operations co-lead of a Series B startup. That's a different skill set." He gave me the flat look of a 12-year-old who had just won without saying another word, and I turned back to the eggs. That was how most mornings went. Small arguments, lost library books, hockey gear at the bottom of the stairs despite a recurring, apparently ineffective, conversation about the bottom of the stairs not being a hockey equipment storage facility. I complained, but I didn't mean it. I liked knowing where everything was. I liked being the person Oliver called when something broke, when something scared him, when something didn't add up. I had promised myself a long time ago that I wouldn't be my father. He left when I was 10, not dramatically, not in any way that gave me something to push against, just gradually and with an air of inevitability, like a bus you watch pull away from a stop before you get there. Birthday cards until I was 16, then not even those. When Oliver's mother decided 3 years into parenthood that the life we'd built wasn't the life she wanted, I already knew what I was going to do. I stayed. Not because I was noble about it, because somebody had to. At work, people knew me as the one who kept things from unraveling. I was the person you called when the deployment broke at 11 p.m., or when a client escalation needed someone who could stay calm long enough to actually fix something. I wasn't the loudest person at Lumio, but I was usually the one still standing at the end of a bad week. Naomi Ashford had co-founded Lumio 6 years before I joined. She was 35, methodical in a way that could make people feel slow if they weren't paying attention. And she had the kind of focus that you rarely saw outside of people who had been competing, since they were old enough to shake hands properly. 3 years working alongside her, and I had learned quickly that the best approach was to bring her problems already half solved, because she had no patience for people who arrived at her desk with a question, and no attempted answer. Personally, I didn't know her at all. She existed at the CEO level, above the daily noise of the office, visible when she needed to be, unreachable in ways that had nothing to do with her calendar. Then came the Series B closing dinner. It was at a private dining room on King Street West, the kind of place with exposed brick and a wine list that required a sommelier to explain it. Investors, board members, early employees. I went because senior team members were expected to be there, and because the company had just raised $68 million, and that felt worth acknowledging in person. I planned to stay 2 hours, make the right introductions, and leave before the dessert course arrived. That plan lasted until I found Naomi standing alone at the bar with her jacket off and her hair down, staring at a glass of sparkling water with an expression that suggested the sparkling water had personally let her down. "You look like you're planning an exit," I said. "I've been planning it since we sat down." The venture partner at table 3 keeps using the word disruptive without any apparent self-awareness. Drinking game potential. I'd be on the floor before the cheese course. We talked for 20 minutes, then 40. She asked about Oliver, and I told her he had a hockey tournament that weekend, and had recently informed me that my packing skills were, in his words, embarrassing for a grown adult. Naomi laughed at that, not a polished professional laugh, a real one, and said her mother had made her redo a handshake at age 11 because it wasn't authoritative enough. I thought she was exaggerating. She wasn't. I remember 2 glasses of wine, then a quieter corner of the bar after the investors migrated toward dessert. I remember her saying she didn't want to perform for another hour. I remember the cab after her address, a door closing on a night that neither of us had planned and both of us chose anyway. By morning, we were 2 adults standing on opposite sides of a very quiet, very well-decorated condo, sober, dressed, and careful. "This can't become anything," she said. "I know, you're my CEO. I know that too." She looked almost irritated that I agreed so easily. We left separately. I picked Oliver up from my neighbors, made him the pancakes I always made when I was avoiding my own thoughts, and told myself it had been one private mistake between 2 tired people who should have known better. 3 weeks later, Naomi's assistant sent me a calendar invite for 4:30 p.m. with no agenda. No subject beyond my name. That kind of invite sat differently in your stomach all day. When I arrived, her office blinds were closed. She was standing, not sitting, and there was no laptop open, no presentation queued, nothing. Just her and the particular stillness of someone who had rehearsed the next sentence, and wasn't sure the rehearsal had been enough. "Close the door," she said. I did. She didn't move for a moment. Outside through the glass, I could see the office floor still running. Developers at standing desks, someone's video call going too loud, a company that had no idea what was happening inside this room. "I'm pregnant," she said. "It's yours." I heard the words clearly. My brain just refused to arrange them in the right order. I looked at her face, then at the desk, then back at her. "You're sure?" "Yes." "About?" "Yes." No anger in it, no performance. She delivered it the way she delivered bad news in board meetings. Clear, direct, already past the moment where emotion would help. I sat down without being asked. She stayed standing. "I'm not asking you for anything right now," she said. "I've already made my decision. I'm keeping the baby." The word baby changed the temperature in the room. Not situation, not complication, baby. I put both hands over my face and tried to find the next sentence that wasn't wrong. There were 50 wrong ones waiting. About timing. My position at the company, Oliver, her and me. What $68 million in fresh funding meant for how publicly this could fall apart. But underneath all of that, something older and more settled came up in me. A child existed now, real, and I knew, with the kind of certainty that doesn't need to be argued into, exactly who I was not going to be. I looked up. "I'm not walking away." She had been braced for almost anything else. I could see it. The slight shift in how she was holding herself, like she'd prepared for negotiation, for denial, for panic, not for a plain answer. "You need to understand what this means at the company level," she said. "Probably not all of it, but I understand that part. The board will have to be managed. Investors will ask questions about governance and judgment. My family," she stopped. "Then, my brother Elliot sits on our cap table. He'll want to be involved." I nodded slowly. "Then we'll handle it." Her hand was pressing hard into the edge of the desk, fingers flat against the wood. I noticed that and said the only thing that felt useful. "Naomi, I'm not going to make this harder for you, but I'm not going to be hidden from my own child either." She held my gaze. "I don't know what that looks like." "Neither do I, but we can take time, we can be careful, I will show up." She looked away for a moment. "People say that." "I mean it." "I know," she said, and the way she said it, like the fact that she believed me, was the most unsettling part of this whole conversation. Stayed with me all the way down to the parking garage. The first few days after that were the kind of strange that secrets always are. At work, nothing changed on the surface. Naomi ran the Tuesday all hands with the same efficiency she always had. I gave my update on the onboarding flow rebuild, argued with the head of engineering about timeline buffers, pretended I wasn't thinking about the conversation that had happened, behind closed blinds on the 23rd floor. A message came 2 evenings later. "Can we meet somewhere not near the office? Tomorrow morning?" Oliver was at the kitchen table with his laptop open and his homework technically in front of him. He had one earbud in and a pencil he wasn't using. "Who's texting?" he asked without looking up. "Work." You made a face. "It's just my face." "No, it's the one you make when something's happened, and you don't know how to explain it yet." I put the phone down. Oliver was perceptive in the way that kids who grow up with one present parent often are. They learn to read the room because the room is smaller and the stakes feel personal. The next morning I met Naomi at a coffee shop near Liberty Village, the kind of place nobody from Lumio would be at before 9. She was already at a corner table in sunglasses, no assistant, no laptop. Just her and a coffee and that expression she wore when she was thinking 3 steps ahead and waiting for you to catch up. "You're early," I said. "So are you." "I'm always early." "I know." She looked up. "I pay attention to the people I work alongside." 2 coffees between us, both going cold. It took a minute to find the register, the one where neither of us had a problem with a ticket number attached to it. "I have an appointment Thursday," she said. "Medical." "Do you want me there?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "I don't know yet." "That's allowed." She looked at me like she'd been expecting a cleaner answer and wasn't sure what to do with an honest one. "I'm used to deciding before I speak." I'm used to making breakfast while answering emails and losing the same argument about granola bars every week. The corner of her mouth moved. That became the shape of things between us over the next 2 weeks. Not easy, but possible. We met for coffee, then once for lunch at a place in Leslieville, quiet enough to talk and far enough from the office that nobody would read anything into it. She ordered soup, ate 4 spoonfuls, then admitted she couldn't stand the smell of it. You can just say you hate the soup, I told her. I chose it. Choosing it doesn't make it good. I generally try not to be corrected by my own decisions. That might be the most startup founder sentence I've ever heard. She pushed the bowl aside, and for the first time she laughed without immediately pulling it back. Those meetings started practical. How long she could keep the pregnancy private, when the board would need to know, what my role could look like without creating a conflict of interest question that investors would use as ammunition. But other things started slipping in around the edges. She asked about Oliver, not the polite surface-level version. She asked what grade he was in, what he was actually like, what made him difficult and what made him good. I told her he liked hockey, true crime podcasts, the specific Timbiebs Timbits from Tim Hortons, that he only bought with his own money as a point of principle, and explaining to me in patient detail why my approach to loading a dishwasher was structurally wrong. He sounds confident, Naomi said. He sounds expensive. You've raised him on your own? Since he was 3, mostly. She waited. She had this way of waiting that was active, like she was making space on purpose. So I told her more than I'd planned to. About Oliver's mother leaving. About the months after. Learning which daycare called first, if there was a problem. Which foods Oliver would eat if I cut them differently. Which nights he needed the hallway light on, and which nights he'd tell me to turn it off because he was too old for that now. About my own father, gone since I was 10. And how absence was something you carried differently depending on the age you first felt it. My father left quietly, I said. No argument. Just gradually less present until he wasn't there at all. So when Oliver's mother left, I already knew what I wasn't going to do. Naomi's expression shifted, carefully, the way she allowed herself things. My family never left, she said. They stayed everywhere, in every decision. Elliot has managed the family's stake in Lumio since the seed round. My mother had notes on my pitch deck. My father co-signed my lease when I was 29. She paused. Staying and suffocating can look very similar from the inside. It was the first time she'd said something about her family that wasn't a professional briefing. By the 3rd week, I had to tell Oliver. I waited until Sunday evening after dinner. He was less likely to escalate on a full stomach, and asked him to sit down. That sounds serious, he said, dropping into his chair with the theatrical exhaustion of someone who had been conscious for 48 straight hours, though he had not been. It is. Did something happen to the car? No. Are we moving? No, just listen. He crossed his arms and watched me with the patience of someone who had decided to be reasonable against his better judgment. Naomi Ashford, I started. Your boss, Naomi Ashford? Yes. He waited. She's pregnant, and the baby is mine. Oliver was quiet for long enough that I started to fill the silence, and then he held up one hand. I'm processing, he said. I waited. Okay, he said slowly, you and your CEO. Yes. And there's going to be a baby. Yes. And you're telling me now. Yes. He looked at the ceiling, brought his eyes back down. Are you going to be involved? Yes. Then why are you acting like you're about to get grounded? I almost laughed, because this changes things for us. How, like, do we move? Does she move in? What changes? You'll have a sibling eventually. Things will look different. But this is still our home. That doesn't change. He turned his phone over in his hands and put it down again. Will she be around? I hope so. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet. You keep saying that. Because it's true, and I'd rather say it than pretend I have answers I don't have. He was quiet for another moment, then, she's your boss. I know. That's a lot. I know that too. He stood up, got a glass of water, drank half of it at the sink, then turned around. Okay, but I want to meet her before I decide how to feel about any of this. And she should know up front that the dishwasher thing is not negotiable. I looked at him. Plates face inward, he said. I've been saying it for 3 years. Maybe she can get through to you. I stayed at the table for a long time after he went upstairs. No slammed door. Just him going up quietly, like he'd decided to absorb the information before he chose a feeling about it. The next morning, I found out from my colleague Preet, who stopped by my desk with coffee, and the careful expression of someone carrying information she wasn't sure how much to share, that Naomi's brother Elliot had been in the boardroom since 11 with 2 people from legal. I kept my face neutral. Family matters. Sure, she said, but she looked at me a beat too long before she left. At 2 that afternoon, Naomi texted, "Elliot wants to meet with you. Private boardroom at 5, I'll be there." I stared at the message, then typed back, "I'll be there." I had never met Elliot in person. I knew him by reputation. Older than Naomi by 8 years, managed the Ashford family's real estate across the GTA and out to Kelowna, sat on 2 boards, known in those circles as the one who arrived when something needed to be handled cleanly. Not a bad person, just an effective one. He was already in the private boardroom on the 22nd floor when I got there. Late 40s, well-dressed in the effortless way of people who've never had to think about it, dark hair going silver. A leather folder sat in front of him on the table. Naomi stood by the window with her arms crossed, looking out at the lake with the expression of someone who had steeled herself for this conversation and resented having to. "Please sit," Elliot said. I sat across from him. Naomi didn't move. "I'll be straightforward," he said. "This situation, and I mean the professional dimension of it specifically, presents a liability for the company at a moment when Lumio is more closely watched than it's ever been. $68 million brings a certain level of scrutiny, and a relationship between a CEO and a direct report." "We're not in a relationship," I said. "A prior situation then, resulting in a pregnancy, will raise questions about judgment and governance that the board and our investors will have to address publicly." He opened the folder and turned it toward me. At the top of the document in clean type, "Settlement and Transition Agreement. We're proposing a transition. You'd move to a comparable role at one of 3 companies in our family's portfolio. Title maintained, compensation matched or improved. Your son's education secured through any post-secondary program he chooses. And a private acknowledgement in the legal record, establishing your relationship to the child." I looked at the folder, then at him. "And my involvement," I said, "with the child." "The child would be fully provided for." That wasn't my question. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not irritation, more like recalibration. "Practical arrangements are always possible." "I'm not asking about arrangements on paper." I kept my voice even. "I'm asking if I'm there, whether I show up, whether my child grows up knowing who I am." He folded his hands on the table, the optics of a public attachment between. "I'm not interested in optics," I said. "I had a father who treated leaving as an option. I know what that does to a kid. So whatever gets written between lawyers, whatever the board wants to be concerned about, whatever story communications eventually needs to put out, it starts from this. I'm not disappearing." Elliot looked at me steadily, then looked at Naomi. She came away from the window. "Close the folder, Elliot," she said. He didn't close it, but he didn't push it further toward me either. "I'm handling the board announcement myself," she said, "on my timeline. And any parenting arrangement will be built around the fact that this child has a father who intends to be present, not managed into the background because it's cleaner for the cap table." "Naomi, I know what you're trying to protect," she said, "but you drafted this before you knew his name." The room went quiet in the particular way of a room where someone who is used to being the final word has just discovered they aren't. I stood, not fast, not dramatic, just done with sitting in a chair that was meant to make me feel like the smaller party. "Whatever needs to be drafted," I said, "start from the truth, not the version that's easier to manage." I left. Naomi didn't follow right away. The elevator down was quiet, and I stood in it feeling calm in that strange way you feel calm when something inside you has already decided and your body is just catching up. That evening, Oliver found me staring at nothing in particular at the kitchen table. "The brother tried to pay you off," he said. "Not a question." I looked up. "How do you?" "You have the same face you had when the old landlord tried to keep our damage deposit and you were deciding how to be calm about it." He sat down. "Did you say no?" "Yes." "Good." He went to the fridge. "She should come here, by the way, Naomi. I have questions and I'd rather ask them in person." 3 weeks later, she came for dinner. She arrived exactly on time, because of course she did. Standing on the porch with a paper bag from the Portuguese bakery near her condo in Leslieville, and the expression of someone who had prepared for a difficult meeting, and was reassessing whether that preparation made sense. Oliver got to the door before I did. He looked at her. She looked at him. You brought pastéis, he said. My assistant said not to show up empty-handed. Your assistant is right, he stepped aside. Come in. Dinner was not smooth, but it was real. Oliver asked her whether she actually wanted the baby, whether she was scared, and whether she thought working with someone and then having a baby with them was, in his words, a logistically complicated situation. She answered every question directly, without making it easier to hear than it was. He respected that. She asked about hockey. He spent 11 minutes explaining the difference between the two tournaments he'd played in that winter, with a level of detail I had rarely seen him apply to anything at school. Naomi listened and then asked about defensive positioning in a way that suggested she actually knew what she was talking about. Oliver paused, recalibrated. Okay, he said, that's a fair point actually. From Oliver in 8th grade to an adult who hadn't earned the shortcut yet. That was approximately the highest compliment he gave. After dinner, while I was at the sink, I could hear them in the living room. Him explaining something at speed, her asking a clarifying question, a pause, him saying, "Yeah, no, you're right." She stopped at the door on her way out, coat half on in the narrow hallway. He's remarkable, she said. He's relentless. He's remarkable, she said again, like she meant it fully. Her phone lit up in her hand. I saw Elliot's name on the screen. She put the phone in her coat pocket without answering it. The following Tuesday she told the board herself. She texted me that morning. Board meeting at 9. I'm handling the announcement today. I wrote back, do you need me there? No, this part is mine to say. At 11:22 she texted again, done, functional. I almost smiled at my desk. The announcement she made company-wide was short and entirely hers. She said she was expecting a child. She said Lumio's plan for continuity was solid and her leadership wasn't going anywhere. She said her private life was going to stay private. She thanked people for their professionalism and looked directly into the camera the entire time. People talked, because they always do, but something in her tone left them less room than they'd been hoping for. Elliot's office sent a letter through the family's lawyers the following week. Naomi forwarded it to me with 2 words. Noted, filed. Then she called that evening and said, "Can you remind me that normal people eat dinner without it being a governance meeting?" So I told her Thursday worked. She came Thursday. Then the Thursday after. Then it stopped being about Thursdays and started being about whenever Oliver had a game and wanted someone extra in the stands, or whenever Naomi wanted to remember what a kitchen table felt like when the conversation didn't have an agenda attached. One night in late September, the kind of cold that reminded you Toronto winters were not a suggestion. We were sitting on the back steps after Oliver had gone inside. Her coat was buttoned. I could see her breath when she spoke. I don't know how to do this without turning it into something to optimize, she said. I know. That's not a flattering thing to admit. It's an honest one. She looked at me sideways. I don't want to manage this, or you. You're not managing me. No, she was quiet for a moment. I'm scared of how much I don't want to. Inside, Oliver's light was still on upstairs. I could hear the faint sound of whatever he was watching. I didn't try to clean up what she'd said or make it easier to hold. I just let it sit between us the way true things sometimes need to before you know what to do with them. Then her hand found mine, not dramatically, like it had decided on its own, independently of either of us. This wasn't the life any of us would have drawn if we'd been asked. Not the version that started the way ours did. Not the version where Oliver eventually weighed in on the baby name, with opinions that were strongly held and not entirely practical. Not the version where Naomi learned that eating dinner at a table where someone could be wrong about something, without it needing to become a corrective action was, in fact, something she had always wanted and didn't know to want. Not the version where I learned that the most controlled person in the room can be the most frightened in ways that have nothing to do with what they're controlling. We didn't have a clean story, we had a true one. And sitting on those cold steps with the city making its low familiar noise beyond the fence, I thought that might be exactly enough.